Okay, welcome again. And the people are handing out an Associated Press article because we've been following the movement of Pluto and Charon as the fulfillment of the ancient myth. And you know, I've been through this so many times, but yet it's just so critically important. I believe that this particular story is the only one that has materialized in our lifetime as something that leaves no doubt whatsoever in connecting an astronomical phenomenon with a myth. Understanding that Pluto and Charon, Pluto, Hades and Charon, were discussed in the myth thousands of years ago. And, you know, it had significance in a story, and you could interpret it as you would. But what became so interesting was that in 1930, we discovered a planet, and they called it Pluto. And that in itself was not any kind of a remarkable phenomena, because if they knew of the ancient myth, they'd say, well, that's the farthest planet from the sun, and Pluto is the doorway to the next world. So, you know, that in and of itself really was not that significant. The significant thing was that Pluto was accompanied by a small gray man who is the boatman carrying you across the river Styx named Charon. And when they discovered Pluto in 1930, there was nothing near. I mean, that was it, Pluto. There was nothing small and gray. So there was no confirmation that you could say, well, that documents the myth. But in 1978, a guy by the name of McNeil found something orbiting Pluto, which was a small gray satellite. So and this is the interesting part. He wanted to name that small gray satellite after his wife. And his wife's name was Charon. And so it obviously became Charon. And so now Pluto and Charon are right where the ancient myth told us they would be. But they've been traveling inside of the orbit of Neptune for about 200 years. And now, as of 4 days ago, February the 9th, Charon's boat left the dock, and Pluto and Charon began their movement out of the orbit of Neptune. And you have now a copy from the Associated Press that Pluto is now where the myth said it would be. It's the doorway to the next world. And on March 15th, it will hit its zenith as the farthest planet from the sun. So, you know, it is extremely, Bob.
One way or the other.
It is extremely significant that this has occurred, and it's something that we're following very, very closely. So when we, you know, in order to say, look, they said Pluto and Charon, we didn't know of anything until 1930, and we found what we named Pluto, and then 1978 we found that Charon was there. So it looked like that this myth had been written by somebody of an intelligence to convey to us this astronomical truth of this existence. And so then we said, well, if that's the case, and if there is credibility to this, which there is, then should not we look at the balance of the myth and say, well, what is it about then? And then wouldn't that be just as credible? You can't say, well, we didn't know these were here, now we found they're here, and so that vindicates the myth as being some kind of a scientific document written in a deep-coded message. So he said, well, what about the rest of it? And what we found in the story of Pluto in the myth was that a young girl by the name of Persephone was picking flowers in the spring, and the trees were, you know, and everything was beautiful and all this kind of business. And suddenly the ground split open, and out came these 4 black horses pulling a chariot, and Pluto snatched this poor wench up and here took her screaming and kicking down into the underworld, and she had to be his queen of the underworld. And then Persephone's mother, who was Ceres, and you know, look at this word This is the mother of Persephone. She's also known as Demeter, but in this particular case here, this root word Sira is root of also the word cerebrum, which means to cover. Okay, but anyhow, Ceres went looking for her daughter Persephone, and she asked the sun, "Have you seen my daughter?" And the sun said no, because a cloud passed in front of me when all of this happened. This is part of the story. But then she asked a tree, and the tree said he heard all of this ruckus, and he did see her being snatched up by cliff. So she goes into the underworld, and she's carrying two torches, Ceres. One of the torches is called logic, and the other torch is called intuition. And she goes into the underworld. Now, these are symbols of you when you go into the underworld of yourself, and you're searching for your daughter. You're searching for what we used to call spirit. You're searching for that part of you which has been dragged into the depths of the lower part of the mind, say. And so Persephone confronted Pluto, and finally, to make a long story short, he said, okay, you can have her up there in the sunshine for 6 months, but I want her down here in the dark cold of my world for 6 months. And so then in the lesser Eleusinian mysteries, they said, well, this is simple. We're talking about winter, and we're talking about summer. But the greater mysteries, which are part of the Eleusinian mysteries that we covered last week, talk of something much more significant: the human mind and its relationship to the grabbing hand of Pluto. What this is doing, and it's so significant now because now, as we see by the Associated Press, Pluto and Charons have moved. The boat has moved across the river Styx and is now ascending to its point as the furthest and the doorway to the next world. What influence does it have? And what were they telling us? Just as we say this is very credible that they were right about this, then why wouldn't they be right about the effects that this has on the human mind? And what it does is it causes chaos. It causes tremendous confusion. It causes a tremendous inner struggle. It pulls you down to the lowest part of your being. And it does this with all humanity. So much of the world as we know it will be subject to this change. And it can be frightening for a lot of people. That's why it is so critically important, this meditation. And we've talked about it. I mean, how simple can it be for these few seconds to be redirecting this light inside of yourself, to be collapsing this wave, to get yourself lined up with this light? Because at the point when this starts to be felt in its awesome power, it's going to cause a lot of chaos. Whether Y2K is part of this, I mean, all of these things are yet to be seen. Probably, as we evolve, it is. But you have to consider, what is it that brings about change? It's confusion. Things begin to flip upside down. Things get totally out of control. And that's Pluto. That's Aquarius. That's Uranus. And the first sign that we had, and we've all followed here together, that something was going to happen, that something, according to the scriptures, was going to happen in the sky that said, this is your first sign, and now start watching. And since that, you've seen all of these things with Hubble, but that was Pegasus, which we followed in 1995. And then the second sign, the single eye on fire. And we went all through that about how the burning fire of the single eye of the pineal gland follows like a fuse called stria pinealis in the brain to the fornix, blows open this furnace, and out comes what they call the fourth man, this whole new identity, this whole new consciousness, this whole new knowledge and feeling of existence within inside of you. But not only you, inside of the mind, but now we find that we have supernova, which is on fire, and the scientists from NASA tell us about the year 2000, it'll come down upon the Earth. And what's a direct line from supernova, the pineal in the sky, to the constellation Fornax, to bring forth that which is the fourth man, or this whole new consciousness to the universe. And so, I mean, if you prove these things astronomically, then you can't just let it say, hey, well, yeah, this is fulfilled. You've got to look at the story, and you've got to understand. And it doesn't make any difference, though you have knowledge about it. What can happen to you? What can happen to your children? What can happen to families? It will happen. And it is this confusion. It is this chaos. It is this depression, which can drag people down. And there's no God doing it. There is no civilization somewhere saying, let's do this and whack these people upside the head and, get their attention. It isn't that at all. It's simply a season. It's something that was programmed to happen from millions of years ago. Because when this Aquarian angle starts to impact the Earth, it opens gates in the brain, and the whole idea, the whole sense of existence and consciousness changes. It is no different than if you're in February and it's very cold now. There will be a tremendous change in July and August. It'll be very hot. I mean, it's just a season of the Earth. And what we're talking about is the season of the universe. And it is come and it is upon us now. And all of the prophecies that were written of by these very brilliant people thousands of years ago. These people that wrote this stuff were not religious people. They weren't spiritual people. They weren't New Age people. These people were pagans. They were scientists. They were astronomers. They were mathematicians. They were medical people. They were like Democritus who talked about electrons. They were Zeno who talked about quantum physics. They were Plato who talked about philosophy in a metaphysical way. I mean, these were brilliant. They were Pythagoras who talked about mathematics and the sounds coming from the spheres in the heaven. These were brilliant minds. People who didn't get involved with God at that level because they focused on reality, and by focusing on reality, they were really focusing on God. They just didn't use that name. But the ones who created the superstitions and all of these things and called it God, contributed to you nothing. These people gave you everything that you use in your life. If you go to your doctor, and the doctor looks in the medical book, he's looking at a Greek word to find out what the problem is. If you look through your telescope, you're probably looking at a Greek word to find out what this thing is up in the sky. And if you sit down in mathematics and they try to compute and so forth and so on, you can go back to Pythagoras. Or if you pick up a book on quantum physics, you can go into the index in 1999 and find the name Zeno in the back of the book. These were brilliant people who wrote this stuff. So you don't look at it and say, well, these are just myths written by these crazy people. These are coded documents written by brilliant minds. And coded documents written until you evolve to the point that you could understand them. It's like I told somebody last night, you go in the first grade and you're studying see Jane run and Jack and Jill going up the hill, and that's a donkey and that's a horse and so forth and so on. But waiting for you to evolve is algebra and trigonometry and geography and all of these things. It's there when you're able to understand it. Well, now you've reached the point where you're starting to be able to understand the nature of the subatomic, and now it's there for you. And now you can understand how you can use this brain, which is a computer. I mean, you can sit down at a computer, and many people consider it a computer, and not know how to do anything with it. And it takes time to work on a computer. But once you understand, you open the world of knowledge. I mean, I can do things that there's no way I could have done them a few years ago. But I can do them now all by myself sitting there without all of these books and all of these things by pushing a few buttons. How? Because I understand how to use it. Well, what do you think? You've got smack right in the middle of your shoulder, sitting on top of you right here, this magnificent instrument that we've never learned how to use. And it is your gateway to the world. It is your gateway to the universe. And now is the time to start to understand how it works. So we followed these signs, and we followed Pegasus as a sign, we followed supernova as a sign, and next we anticipated the movement of Pluto to loose itself from the bounds of Neptune, and we find out in the Associated Press that 4 days ago Charons' boat left the dock and it moved out of the orbit and is now crossing the river Styx heading up to the gateway to the next world, and it's then going to park and look down upon all of us. So it's an exciting, exciting time. The king of darkness is about to be in position and to make changes. You say, well, these changes are wonderful. When you clean everything up, it's wonderful. But remember what I always say. It's wonderful when you clean a room, but not for the dirt. So you may begin to feel the confusion. You may begin to feel the chaos if you haven't already felt it. You may begin to feel it. You may be able to sense this thing. And this is where you've got to start to take those few seconds and start to focus and start to bring that light, to start to collapse the wave. You've got to do that. The world's going to begin to feel it more and more because Charon has launched the boat, and you've got the proof of it. And what you've got the proof from is not from some New Age thing or from some astrological thing. You've got it from the Associated Press. Charon, the little gray boatman, has pushed his staff into the muddy shore of the river Styx and has begun to move. And still March 15th will be the day of the highest position, but the boat has left the shore. And then you have that Associated Press article. So we wait for March 15th. Now I'm giving you this article, and you know, hope you'll make it a part of the stuff that you have. But underworld of Pluto or Hades is the lower realms of the earth as contrasted with the universe above and the lower aspects of your mind. When you now start to understand it, and when you feel that you're down into the darkness, when you don't know which way to go and you're totally in confusion, then you can look, and actually the god of your life at that time is Pluto. Not really. Not really. I mean, Pluto is not causing this. Charons is not causing this. No individual planet or constellation is causing this. It is the whole electromagnetic web that is repositioning itself. And when the whole electromagnetic web repositions itself, the angles of light are different. So some guy wrote to me on the internet and says, you're crazy. You're telling people to meditate in a dark room, but you're saying that they're supposed to get hit by photons. Photons are stopped by walls. And you can't get into a dark room. You have to go outside because otherwise photons are reflected. But if you're looking in the light spectrum like this, he's absolutely right. If you turn this light on and close the doors, the light can't get outside. He's absolutely right. I'm not talking about the color spectrum, the light spectrum of orange, red, green, and blue. I'm talking about gamma. I'm talking about ultra. I'm talking about infra. I'm talking about radio, X-rays. I'm talking about the magnificent power. I mean, gamma rays can go through a concrete wall 10 foot thick. So people think, and they don't really, they don't understand. We're not talking about light in the context of that light on the wall. We're talking about electromagnetism. Anywhere you are, electromagnetism is piercing your body constantly. And this is what we're talking about. Pluto has snatched you and pulled you down to his underworld kingdom when chaos and confusion are reigning. And there seems to be seasons in your life, and sometimes the sun is shining, and you can see Persephone up there picking her flowers, and little sheep running around, and the waterfalls is going, and everything is pretty, and all the birds are chirping, and so forth and so on. And then suddenly it becomes dark and confused, and the winds howl. And they used to say in the myth, the part of the myth, was that when Persephone had to go back down with Pluto, all the trees and all the shrubs and bushes would die of broken hearts, and all their leaves would fall to the ground, symbolizing the wintertime. Sometimes, though, it seems that the winter of your soul will never, ever end, and you don't know. And your daughter, which is your spirit, is down deep in the darkness, and then comes Ceres, the mother of the spirit. And she comes, and she is your higher mind in this adventure. And she comes with logic in one hand, and that's what we use here. And she comes with intuition in the other hand, and that is your meditation. And then she starts searching. And so when you look in meditation, according to this myth, what you're doing is you're calling out inside of yourself, Persephone, Persephone, where are you? Persephone, and you're trying to find that part of you that has been dragged deep down into the underworld. That's your meditation. And that's what you have to do. You have to go deep into the depths of your lower being to bring that true light yourself back up into the spirit, back up into the light. There's something above and beyond the seasons of the soul. There is the salvation of the soul. And there enters the other two signs, Pegasus, the winged white horse, and supernova, the single eye, the pineal gland, which are very active now. You see, this is a convergence in the electromagnetic universal web. And Albert told us last week or the week before that as soon as Pluto will start to move, it'll set in motion something in the whole web because it changes the configuration of the entire web. I mean, you've got the documentation. The electromagnetic web is not configured as it was last week. February 9th it changed because Pluto and Charon left and went in a different direction. So the whole web now has changed. It affects the whole universe. And remember when Dr. John Gribbins, and I showed you this, he said if you touch an electron on Earth, every electron in the Andromeda galaxy is aware of it. How many atoms, how many electrons have shifted in this great celestial move of Pluto and Charon? How have they changed and shaken the entire universe, and then shaken and shaken and shaken down, which will be human consciousness shaking it to the core? Nothing to be afraid of, provided that you prepare yourself for it. There's nothing to be afraid of the winter, provided you're prepared with proper clothing. But you can't go out in your bikini, in February. You might get a cold, obviously. So you've got to be prepared. And in the same way, if you're prepared for this, and you've been told and told and told what you have to do. And it is nothing that requires you to be a physicist or to be an astronomer. It requires you simply to be still, tell yourself you're watching yourself, hold your breath for a few seconds, and start to shift that radar, if you would, inside of you towards the pineal, towards the center, so that the messages for you collapse and can come into you and instruct you where you go from here. Remember what the ancients called the initiation activity that brought one out of the depths to the lower light? What was it called? You might not have been here last week. It was called autopsy. No? Autopsy. That's what I called it. What does it mean, autopsy? It's a Greek word. What does it mean? It means looking inside of a dead body to find the reason and the cause of the death so that you can bring it back to life. And that's what they're saying. The Aleutians, they were saying that the body is a tomb until you learn and that you understand. And so you can then resurrect and rise out of the tomb. But in order to do that, you've got to look inside of yourself. You've got to do an autopsy on yourself while you're alive. See, the gods were said to dwell in Mount Olympus. The 12 deities dwelled together as the 12 signs of the zodiac, as the 12 cranial nerves of the brain. And then one would climb the twisting passageway out of the lower depths up to the realms and come out into the mountaintop. And they were called, well, it's a Greek word, but it was Epoptes. And that word means one who has seen directly, one who has beheld, one who sees. Right? But I mean, if I sit here telling you that, you know, something is coming down, I mean, if you're in the path of a hurricane and a weather service gets on and says, you know, there's a hurricane coming and it's going to go right through this town, and you're in that town, you take preparations, you get concerned. Well, everybody's been telling you this is going to happen. And you know in your heart that this change is coming down upon the earth. And so you've got to be prepared. You've got to take it seriously because you want to be a survivor. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's no God or there's nobody else aiming for anybody. It's a shift of the season of the universe that's coming. In the same way that now this is winter time, but then you'll suddenly start to feel warm breezes. You'll see robins. You'll see little things come popping out on the branches, and you realize something is coming. Something is going to change. And then when that's over, you'll feel the cold and the leaves start to fall, and you say, something is coming. Something is about to change. Well, all of these signs that have happened over the past years, for God's sakes, has told you something is happening. Something is about to change. And it started really about 100 years ago when you made a light bulb. That was the first evidence that there's a change in consciousness. There's a change in understanding. There's a change in enlightenment. What happened? Where were you? What were you doing 500,000 years? 100 years ago you made a light bulb, and then all of a sudden you got very smart. How come? What happened? There was a change in the angle. And that's like it says in the Bible in 1 Corinthians. It says, now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. You're known as light. You've convinced yourself because of these screwballs up here that you're, you know, a human being and you're part of this body, and this body is going to go in a grave and then it's going to pop up and you're going to run across the sky somewhere in some town called heaven and all of this stuff and have a mansion next door to Jesus and all of these types of crazy things. And it has nothing to do with that. And you know it has nothing to do with that. You're light inside of this body. And it says, and then you will know as you are known, and you'll know face to face. And Jacob says, my life has been preserved. I have seen God face to face, and I shall call the place Peniel. I mean, you know. So then meditation or functioning through the pineal, watching oneself to collapse the wave function, seeing into oneself is actually examining a dead body. Well, how could you say the body's dead? Because it's irrelevant. It is irrelevant to the picture of coming to the point of a celestial body, coming to the point of a higher body, coming to the point of an advanced intellect. For instance, those who live on different places who are thousands of light years ahead of us in understanding things. Why should something so wonderful be kept secret or away from masses of people and only privy to a select few? And the answer to that was, when this stuff was written, the people had not evolved to a point where they could understand. I mean, this is 1999, and I can't tell people this stuff. They can't deal with it. Don't dare tell them that the snake didn't tell Eve not to eat an apple. That's the way they believe that. Don't dare tell them that the whale didn't puke and the evangelist didn't come out. They know that it did. Don't dare tell them that God got ticked off because you go to Atlantic City, so nail this guy up on a post. They believe that. Has to be that way. Nothing can change that. And why? Because of the cult they belong to. You saw them. You saw the cults voting in Washington over the weekend. It doesn't make any difference whether Clinton was right or Clinton was wrong. It depended which cult you belong to. If you belong to this cult, he didn't do it. You belong to this cult, he did it. That's it. Bingo. And it's all it means. And that's exactly the way we operate in our religions. It depends what cult you belong to. If you belong to this cult, Jesus is Lord. If you belong to this cult, Allah is Lord. If you belong to this cult, Buddha. If you belong to it depends on which cult you belong to. And they're all different guys. And nobody stops to think, let's get rid of all the cults and all that nonsense, and then start to focus on the reality that you live in, this great universal electronic web of reality. And let's start to plug into it, and then you'll be taken right into the arms of God. Now, how significant were these mysteries? When I tell you about this stuff, and we talk about, the myths and so forth. There was a guy named Overoff who wrote of the ancient times, and he wrote as follows. He said, would Pindar, Plato, and Cicero have spoken of these stories with such admiration if the teacher had satisfied himself with loudly proclaiming his own opinions or those of his order? In other words, these are things of nature. These are things of the cosmos. These are things of the universe. And Plato followed them, and Socrates followed them, and all of these guys followed them, and they weren't given to follow crazy stuff like this. They knew that there was coded messages of great scientific value. And the person who was worthy of being allowed to enter into the fullness of mysteries passed through two gates. And the first led downward into the lower world and symbolized birth into ignorance. And that's where it came. When your mother started to have something growing inside of her, in about the third month when the pineal gland formed in the fetus, suddenly you came on the scene as an angle of light, and you found your way to that pineal, and then you nested in that body, and that's been your nest ever since. That's been your home ever since. And that's that downward passage into ignorance. But then the second led up into a room brilliantly lighted, which we're all looking for now, and what you're looking for now. The gates are symbols of the same gates that operate your computers. Your computers that you operate, they have gates. Gates are logic circuits. In the human brain, they're called OR gates. But there is a logic that is clouded by the darkness of religion and superstition have told us all of these things. And there's a logic that comes from within a person that tells you that this feels right, that tells you this is the truth. Even though you're reluctant to speak outwardly for fear of retribution from your family or your friends. This is a paragraph from Eleusinian Symbolism, and this is what it says. God, being a luminous principle, residing in the midst of the most subtle fire, remains forever invisible to the eyes of those who do not elevate themselves above material life. Will always be invisible until you elevate yourself. Here you sit here, and this whole thing is changing, and you're getting reports constantly on CNN, on television, on radio, in the newspapers, the Associated Press, telling you all of these things happening, and still so many of us, we walk around like, and that's what the Bible says. They walk around like, gonna get married, gonna do this, gonna do that, like nothing's gonna happen, and something big time is gonna happen. And that's why sometimes, and I hear the boat moving now of Charons has moved out of its dock. The angles of light will pour down upon the earth. And I see so many empty chairs at meditation. And please, that's fine. But if you're doing it somewhere, that's fine. It's nobody's business. But I cringe because I'm telling you of things that were honored by Plato and Socrates, neither of whom were religious people. But they were master intellects familiar with the sciences and the reality of the interaction. I'm telling you the truth. I am telling you the truth. I've told you over and over concerning the light. the magnetism which is flowing down, the magnetism which is changing, the photon which must be collapsed by observation. And everything in the mysteries was attributed to the gods that was luminous, that shone, the sphere, all that was in the universe, the sun and the moon, everything that was light. And they spoke of the invisible powers inherent in which was the subatomic structure, which was suppressed by the church. Theodosius, who was a church leader, destroyed all of these things that did not accept the Christian faith. And to this day, any reverence to nature, the universe, the invisible, which is really the power and essence of ourselves and what we call God, is considered evil by these people out here. And what they are warned to embrace is the physical. And why? I mean, it's so obvious. And they'll tell you, oh, stay away. Don't do any meditation. You'll open yourself to demons. Frightening people because they don't want people to come to grips with themselves. They don't want people to find out who they really are. They don't want people to find the truth of their individuality. They don't want people to find the truth that God, the essence of God, is inside of each human being. They don't want people to find that out. And only one reason, money. Only one reason, power. Because when you find that God is within you, what in the world do you need them for? And they don't want that. So we have looked closely at the story of Pluto and Charon and the mysteries, which portrays Pluto dragging us down to the lower realms as the mother desperately tries to bring us back up into the light. But now something is reaching down like a giant hand from Pegasus and from supernova, fornax, and the multitudes in the celestial heavens reaching down to bring change to the entire human experience. Ready or not, here we come. And this, of course, is the movement to assume the position that Pluto does as the doorway to the next world, meaning that the trip across the river Styx is about to happen for many people. And whether it's going to be to the lower world or whether it's going to be to Elysium is totally up to you. No God has anything to do with it. You're the master, you're the captain, you're the master or the captain of your fate. It's up to you, you do it. I know it's tough. It'll require maybe 5 or 6 seconds a day. But that's tough. Because that 5 seconds, even think of that, that 5 seconds takes you away. And it's not the fact that 5 seconds, that's an insignificant period of time, but it's the point that your mind won't even let you think of it. You say, oh, I forgot, because your mind doesn't want you to think of it. Sometimes it's difficult for us to understand the words used to describe what's going on. The Bible says God is light, and you are light. That's who you really are. Yet we sit in total darkness in meditation. We're open to the light in total darkness. How can the light enter in total darkness? It's light outside. It's dark in here. How can the light get into here? And the Bible says, woe for them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. I've had people, as I told you, telling me about this and not understanding the power. They used to call it spirit. The Holy Spirit entered the room. Yeah, you bet. You bet. Rays, tremendous, powerful rays emanating down from these constellations or from these appointed celestial bodies, penetrating into the room and opening themselves to anyone who will be willing to watch and collapse the waves that it may enter into you as a particle. You have mail. But you have got to get your mail. You've got to open the mailbox. Nobody can do it. We're talking about infrared, cosmic, gamma rays. We're talking about the electromagnetic field, which is the energy of the entire universe. And what is the carrier of those electromagnetic fields? What is the carrier of all the power of nature in the universe? Photon. It is so important that you're a part of this now, because the negative impact results of confusion and chaos and our whole world being turned upside down is a possibility that's too serious for you to take a chance with. What, for 5 seconds you can't? Why take a chance with this? Why not do it? What is it? It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to inconvenience yourself. But you've got to start redirecting that defective angle to place it back into position to receive the new angles of light that are coming down from the man with the pitcher of water. What did Jesus say? When you see the man with the pitcher of water, go to the upper room and I'll meet you there. And this is the upper room. And the man with the pitcher of water is the magnetism flowing down from the Aquarian age. In order to understand Pluto and Charon and Photon and all of these things and how they affect us, you have to sit with a quantum physicist, really. And that's why it is not good for you to go out of here and say, Bill said this. Oh, and then some guy up the street, he forked the river, whatever. That's why it's important for you to go like to Barnes & Noble or one of these stores and buy one of these books I've told you about, to listen to these guys. John Gribben from Schrodinger's Kittens in the Search for Reality says this: when we look at things, listen to this. Please, you're not listening to a religious person or a New Age person. You're listening to somebody who knows how this works. All right? And he's talking about you. When we look at things, you know how you look at things. Obviously, we see them using interactions between photons and atoms, or rather, the electrons in the outer parts of these atoms in our eyes. It is the atoms in your eyes, the electrons in your eyes, that are interacting with the photon that are causing you to see. So that's what he's saying. See? So there is an interaction between the electromagnetism, or photon, coming in, and the electrons located in the atoms in your eyes. Now he goes on. When messages about what we feel and see or hear or smell or taste are passed to our brains, they are passed along networks of nerves using electrical impulses. As we have seen, these nerve impulses cross gaps called synapses, and to do so, they stimulate chemical reactions. But chemical reactions themselves are simply processes that involve the electrons in the atoms, which are driven by the process of electromagnetism. The electromagnetism drives the process, stimulating the electrons in your eyes and all parts of your body that cause you to have this sensation of existence. And finally, Dr. Gribben says this. Listen, please, very carefully to what he's about to say, because this really sums up everything I've been pleading with you to hear from me. The very workings of our brains depend upon the same kind of chemistry, that is, on the exchange of photons. The very working of your brain depends on the exchange of photons. So you're going to have new states of consciousness. You're going to think differently. The whole world is going to be shaken down to think differently. The financial institutions of the world. And you know what? Some people for years, I want to tell you something. Some people for years have referred to the financial institutions of the world, the people who run these things. You know what they're called? The gray men. The gray men. Find that, and you can find it. You can find it in in a book about finances. So the brain will change the very course of civilization in this world. Dr. Gribben has told you how it happens to you. How is it going to happen in the universe? The very brain that's encased in every living thing will be changed in the world by electromagnetism, being the exchange of photons. It's the electromagnetism that allows your heart to beat. Did you ever listen to your heartbeat? Da-boom, da-boom, da-boom. So what the heck keeps that going? How is that going? What is it plugged into? What are you plugged into? Do you look behind yourself to see if there's something plugged into the wall? Well, how are you doing this? Why doesn't it stop? And sometimes it does, but well, it should. But I mean, what is causing this? And these things are it is a photon that animates every part of you. It is the inner light that is the true you. It is the you who's really part of this great electromagnetic web covering the universe. It is the same web that is the arachnoid covering your brain. I look at Cindy at the time now, we kid with her and everything, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. She was always a beautiful little girl, but she is so beautiful now because something so special has happened. And you know what they said? In her 3rd month, when that pineal was formed in the little baby that's inside of her, then an angle of light came down. An angel of light came down. And that angel of light came and nested inside. It's not the body that she and Vinnie created. It is the angel of light who came and entered her and nested to bring the God part. And that's beautiful. That is such A beautiful, beautiful thing. And this beautiful angel of light came and is now part of her. As she was in her mother, a new angel came down and now is part of her. And when you start thinking in those terms, you never look at people, you never think of things. And just remember, we were talking about this last night, but even you can walk in New York and see people laying on the street with a bottle of wine next to them, and the body looks so terrible, and their life looks so terrible. But inside of that person is that same angel of light that is inside of everybody else. But we didn't know how to treat each other as people, and that's why the change now that must come upon the earth, because it's not right that that man lies in an alley. It's not right that that child lays under cardboard. It's not right that we drop the bombs, and it's not right that we starve and do all these different things to nature and to each other and to oppress each other. And this is how you are described. And when I look at Cindy, you are described in the Bible as a child of light. And that's what she is carrying now, a child of light. And that child came as an angel of light from heaven, if you would, to nest inside of her. And we all did. But the problem was we were then assaulted. As soon as we came forward out of our mother's womb as a child of light, we were assaulted by the powers of darkness. And our light was snuffed out. And now you have to reestablish the light. You have to reestablish yourself to the power with a new bulb so that the light goes on again. All over the world. And that's why the movement of the planets in the universe and the movement of other bodies has such a profound effect on all life. And you know what they said in the Aleutian Mystery? I don't know, Cindy may not know this. But as she was in her 3rd month and probably slept, at midnight, the angel came. The angel always comes at midnight. And entered and nested and began to live. The light went on at midnight. Electrons jump from orbit to orbit, absorbing or emitting electromagnetic energy as they do, and this is what happens. They're in orbit. You've seen it. That's what happens when light comes on. An electron gets stimulated and it jumps out of orbit, moves into another orbit. And as they do, they emit energy. This is where energy comes from. Energy comes when an electron in an atom moves from one orbit to another. That's where energy comes from. Well, what do you think has happened? What has just happened? Pluto and Charon have moved from one orbit to another. The energy comes. And you have to be prepared to receive that energy. One of the points that's very important to you, and I'll just touch on it before we leave, is drinking from the river of Lethe. Okay. Lethe is the water of oblivion. When Charon will take you across the river Styx, and remember something, please don't, I need you to think adultly. There's nobody getting on a boat and going across any river. You do understand this. I'm just taking this for granted. This is all symbolism. This river is a movement of your consciousness, of your body, of your spirit, of your mind, okay? But when Charon takes you across the river Styx, the first thing that one would do would find themselves thirsty. And they're tempted to drink of Lethe. And when you drink of the river Lethe, you forget everything. This is what I'm telling you. Because you're about to have an experience. You're about to have a deep experience. See? Because what happens then, you go through life not able to make progress because you've always forgotten. You don't know who your mother is. You don't know who your father is. You don't know who your family is because you forgot them all. Always born again and again with no idea of the past because of constantly drinking from Lethe. But the instructions to you are as follows. You shall find to the left of the house of Hades a spring. And by the side you'll find a white cypress. To this spring approach not near. Now this will make sense to you as you start to get deeper into, don't worry about it right now, but you shall find another spring, and the spring is called the spring of Monosmony. Cold water flowing forth from the spring. And there are guardians. Now, Leth is associated on the left side of the house of Hades. And a white cypress stands next to the spring. White is the color of spirit, and cypress is the mother. But it is that which is the lower, the carnal, and it is that which is the mother of that side. It's simply stating that the left side is used to impersonate that which is the truth, which is found at the right side. Monosmony is the truth and the spring from which you must drink. You must not drink from the spring at the left side, which is left. Because you have, and you have never been able to come to grips with who you are. You've never been able to understand what your purpose is. You've never been able to understand where have you been, where are you going. You haven't a clue because you've constantly been drinking from there. But you've got to now drink from that which is monosmony. And you approach the spring because the white cypress gives you thought that this is the true mother. But always when you think of that, and when you see this in your meditations, and you will see this in visions, when you see that white cypress, remember when Jesus cursed the fig tree and it was loaded with leaves, but he said, you'll bear no fruit, because there was nothing growing on the inside. So we find the lake of Monosmony. Where are you going to find that? The spring that feeds the lake of Leth is the spring of forgetfulness. Monosmony is the goddess of memory. And the spring of Monosmony is one that we learn which was caused by the hoof of Pegasus. When Pegasus spread his white wings and his mighty white steed flew through the clouds, and he came close to the mountain of the Muses, and his hoof hit the top, and it gushed forth this spring. And this spring is the spring of memory. It was on the mountain of Hippocrene. Inside of you is the hippocampus of your brain, the place of memory. The word means white seahorse, which is Pegasus. So here in the dark, murky inside of you, in chaos and confusion, in depression, in guilt, in fear and hate, in the dark place of the river Styx, and now as the movement starts in the universe of Hades and Pluto, we find the river of forgetfulness, which is Heth, and the spring of memory, which is Monosmony. And we reach memory as we start to rise in these meditations that I've been asking you, and you start to move and collapsing that wave, and the hippocampus starts to turn itself on, the white horse Pegasus, and then you will remember who you are, where you're coming from, where you're going. And there is no other way. And now that Pluto and Charon have left the shore to take their position to the next world, it is extremely important that you stop drinking from the place of the white cypress. But look within yourself. Separate from the thoughts of the mind and touch the hippocampus, the place of memory. And the winged white horse Pegasus carries the lightning bolts, and he will throw lightning from the east to the west, from the right side to the left side, to those who do. And you'll have your memory restored, and you will be restored to your family of light. Now is the time of Pluto, of Charon, of Leth, of Monosmony. Now is the time to understand as adults that a civilization of a very advanced race came to this planet and provided you with the basis of your scientific culture. Now that we have finally used what was given to us by this race, it is important to follow along with the things that they have told us in these coded messages, awaiting until we've evolved to this point of understanding. You can ignore it, but at the same time, you will absorb into yourself the chaos and the confusion, or you can choose to flow in the harmony with it, following a different path. The only possible way that you can reunite with this light. Not meditation that's been taught by people at high schools or for $25 or anything like this, but collapsing that wave, holding your breath, and doing it with this conscious need to realign yourself to this coming light. Meditation to most people is a way to die to yourself. It is a way to try and run away from the true person that you are physically and find something totally different that you may be or you may possibly become. It's different because religion focuses on physical death. Meditation has no connection to physical death. Meditation follows the strange word of the Bible by Paul that says, I die daily. You die daily. How can you die daily? You die daily by abandoning yourself in meditation. You're seeking to connect yourself to everything that does not exist in the physical realm. And how do you do that? You shut down your breath. You shut down your breath. You collapse that wave. And the exact thing that happens to people when the physical dies happens to you when you're alive in good health and you start to move in and out via the pineal to reunite yourself with the mother light. It's the only way that one can make contact. And you move into a whole new dimension of awakening. And in Zen, this experience is referred to as the Great Death. And I've told you before, the mantra is, if you die before you die, then when you die, you'll never die. Deep in the dark recesses, the stopping of the breath stimulates the brain to begin to actively participate in the death process. And you come to the edge of this cliff, and you look out over the promised land, and you look at it, all that you remember now, all that you were part of. And then you start to find why you were here, why you are alive, why you can walk, why your heart beats, what is a purpose, what is the need of existence, what is the very essence of life itself. And so then you gain control over the four winds, you gain control over your mind, and you can transcend the mind for your reunion of light, much in the same way as the little character in the show E.T. did when he went into the mountaintop and sat there in his little fingerlet and said, home, home. Then you find your true home, your true light. That's what life is. Religion has taught you that everyone can go to heaven and everyone can fly up to paradise and be saved and all this stuff, but you know through your own experience that in order to do different things in life, you have to know what you're doing. It's great to go to the moon, but not everyone can go there, only those who know how. Well, you've got to go back home. And if you don't know how, just that simple stopping of meditation and collapsing the wave will take you and find you. Ladies and gentlemen, Pluto and Charon have left the building. Thank you. We'll see you. Bye-bye.